Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this lecture on Philippine politics and governance. I hope that this will help you in your studies. You may take note or jot down notes and look at your constitution after the lecture if you want to. So as a review, in the evolution of Philippine politics and governance, the major impact of the stages of the Philippine politics and governance might be the attainment of what we call the democracy of the Philippines and the birth of our Constitution, specifically the 1987 Constitution. Now, what is the Constitution? So the Constitution is the paramount or the supreme or the fundamental law of the land. Being the paramount or fundamental law of the land, then any law, however noble its intention may be, if it conflicts with the Constitution, shall be declared invalid. So that's how important the law, which is the Constitution, is. Now, in the Constitution of the Philippines, it is provided that there are three branches of the government, and these branches enjoy separation of powers. However, there is what we call blending of powers. So we will go to it as we discuss these branches one at a time. But this time, we shall be going over to this first branch, which is the executive branch of the government. The second one is the legislative, and the third one is the judiciary. But as I told you, we're going to go first to the executive power or executive branch of the government. So, the executive branch of the government is found in Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution. So again, welcome to our lecture, and this is prepared by yours truly as a supplement for your studies. Let's go and start learning. So what are our aims, or what are our targets or our objectives to achieve after listening to this lecture? First is we are going to enumerate the composition of the executive branch. After that, we will explain the powers of the executive branch of the government. And lastly, we are going to cite observed application of the executive power. Now, there may be cases or sample cases that will be discussed or that will be given as examples, but this will be recent cases so that you will be able to relate if you were born in 2000. So maybe you are only 20 years old by now. Okay, are you ready? Let us go over the lesson now. We start with the executive power. So executive power can be found in Article 7, Section 1 of the Constitution. What does Section 1 state? It states that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the Philippines. So being the chief executive, now executive power is vested in the President of the Philippines. So what is executive power? Executive power is the power to enforce and to administer the laws of the land. So it is the president, being the highest official, that has the power to enforce and to administer the laws. So he has the authority. But is it authority only? Okay, so it is coupled with responsibility. No? It is coupled with responsibility to see to it that laws are faithfully executed. So because of this, we can consider the president as the highest official of the land or the most influential person in the country. I don't know if you agree or disagree with me. Okay, so that is all about executive power. Now, what is the composition of the executive branch of the government? So as I said a while ago, the first one is our president. If you don't know who our president is, then I think you have to do more research. No? So of course our president is President Duterte. No? And Section 2 of Article 7 enumerates the qualifications of a president. So if you want to be a president someday, then you memorize by heart the qualifications of a president. So it states there that no person shall be a president unless, first, he is a natural-born citizen of the Philippines. So there is a very interesting case about this, no? Being a natural-born citizen of the Philippines. So what is meant by natural-born citizen? For the meantime, we can say that a natural-born citizen is a citizen who is a citizen by birth without having to do an act in order to acquire or to perfect his Philippine citizenship. So there is a case, if you remember, Miss Poe filed her candidacy for the president. No? She filed her candidacy for presidency during the 2016 election. However, there was a petition to deny or to cancel her candidacy filed in the COMELEC. And when it reached the Supreme Court, however, the Supreme Court decided or stated that Grace Poe is a natural-born Filipino citizen, because remember, Grace Poe is a foundling. So if you want to read that case, then you may after the discussion. Next, you have to be a registered voter and you should be able to read and write. So do you need to be a college graduate? In that certificate of candidacy, do you need to write that you are a college graduate? No need. What is important is that you are able to read and write. So if you can read and if you can write, even if you do not understand, then you can become the president. Okay? Next, you have to be at least 40 years old on the day of the election. Even if you are not 40 years old when you filed your candidacy, so long as during the day of the election you are 40 years old, then you can be the president. You will not be disqualified. And lastly, you must be a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately or yes, before such election. So those are the qualifications for a president. No? So that is the first composition of the executive branch. Again, we have the first one is the president. The second one is the vice president. Okay, our present vice president is Vice President Lenny Robredo. Okay, so it is stated also in Section 4, no? And the function of the Vice President is also given in Section 8 of Article 7, 1987 Constitution. So what does it say there? The Vice President has the same term as the President. No? One term is equal to 6 years, and the President cannot be re-elected, but the Vice President can be re-elected. So she can serve for 2 terms, no? Continuous terms. Now, according to Section 8, the Vice President is to assume the presidency in case of the death, disability, or the resignation of the incumbent president. So, can you remember a president who was succeeded by the vice president? Okay, so an interesting case there is the case of President Estrada. So he was succeeded by President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo because of what? Is it death, disability, or resignation? because of his resignation. So when President Estrada waved kaway-kaway, waved to his fans or to the people when he went out of Malacanang, and he acknowledged the oath-taking of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. That symbolizes his resignation as the incumbent president, according to the Supreme Court. Okay, so Macapagal Arroyo was now declared as the president, and she took oath as the president of the Philippines. Okay, so that is the work of the vice president, and the vice president can be appointed by the president as a member of the cabinet. Okay, so we will discuss that later. The last composition in the national level is the cabinet. So what is the cabinet? So there are executive departments, no? So those secretaries are called cabinet members, and they are the alter ego of the president in the respective departments. So here comes this doctrine, or the alter ego doctrine. When you say the alter ego doctrine, there you go. So it means that the act of these executive secretaries or the subordinates of the president are considered or are presumptively the acts of the president if it is performed in their duty. Okay, so while they are performing their duties, so their acts in the performance of their duty, okay, or in the disposition, or in the, okay, so there are acts that are performed or promulgated in, okay, so in the regular course of business, or while they are in the performance of their duties, are presumptively the acts of the president, and these are official unless they are disapproved by the president. So that is the function of the cabinet members. So they can issue circulars, orders, no? And these are presumptively the acts of the president. So they are the extension of the president, such that the secretaries of the different executive departments can decide, no, without being appealed, without their decisions being appealed to the president or office of the president. So what are the examples of these executive departments? You have the Department of Education. And who is the secretary? Of course, our very own secretary, Leonor Magtolis Breones. And you have also the Department of Environment and Natural Resources with its secretary. You have Secretary Roy Simatu. Now remember, however, that there are sometimes exceptions whereby the decision of an executive secretary has to be appealed to the president because it is expressly provided by law. So that is in case of the decision of the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So his decision has to go or has to be reviewed by the president, even if he is the alter ego of the president in that respective department. Why? It is because it is expressly provided by law. It is mandated by law. Okay? So those are the composition of the executive department in the national level. We repeat, we have first the president, the vice president, and you have the cabinet. So the cabinet is we said that the vice president can serve as a cabinet member concurrent to being the vice president. So he can or she can occupy two positions if the president will appoint her or him as a cabinet member. Okay? In the local level, there are also local executives. okay, as provided by the Local Government Code of 1991. So we're going to go briefly over them so that you know that there are local chief executives. First is the governor. So of course, governor is the chief executive in the province. So if you live in a province, for example, if you are in Benguet, then Benguet is a province. You have a governor in the name of Governor Melchor de Clas. So that's it. And then the second one is the city or the municipal mayor. Of course, because we live in a city that is Baguio City, so we have only our city mayor. Okay, we don't have a governor. We don't have a municipal mayor. And who is our city mayor? It is Benjamin Magalong. Okay, so the city mayor or municipal mayor is the local chief executive in the city. And lastly, okay, you have the barangay captain. Of course, the barangay captain is also the local chief executive in the barangay level. So we are here in Barangay Santo Tomas Apugan. So our barangay captain is Barangay Captain Godofredo B. Kawaing. So he is our local chief executive in the barangay. Okay, so it's good that you know that we have local chief executives, no? And then we have the national level. Now, we go further by discussing the powers of the president, as stated in Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution. So you have there, the first one is, okay, so the powers of the president. We go to the first one, which is the appointing power. So what is the appointing power? If you want to know where it is in Section 16 of Article 7, 1987 Constitution. So the president can appoint. Okay, so what does appointment mean? Appointment is the selection. Who will select? Of course, the person in authority, and we are referring here to the president. Selection of an individual who is to exercise the functions of a given office. So the president has that power. So if you can see there, or if you found Section 6, it states there that the president may appoint, but with the confirmation of the Commission on Appointments. So there must be a confirmation of the Commission on Appointments. So who are these persons that can be appointed by the president and must be with the confirmation of the Commission on Appointments? Later, when we go to Executive Department, we will be dealing or talking about the Commission on Appointments. Okay, so who are these people? You have there the enumeration, heads of the executive departments. Okay, who else? The ambassadors or other public ministers and consuls. You have also the officers of the armed forces, no? And from the rank of colonel or naval captain. And another is other officers, no, whose appointments are vested in him by the Constitution. So who can be appointed by the president? So those ones, also the Chief Justice of the Philippines. Okay, others, for example, are those that the law does not provide, no, who will appoint. So they can be appointed by the president, and also the judges of the inferior courts. So that is the appointing power. So he can appoint them. No? However, with that appointing power, there is an implied removal power. So if the president can appoint, then he could also remove. No? So there, it is implied from the power to appoint. However, he cannot just remove them. No, there must be a justifiable cause or reason, especially these ones which are appointed or confirmed by the Commission on Appointments, right? So it must conform with administrative procedure. So there must be causes of their removal. Okay? The next one is found in Section 17, which is the control power of the President. So what is the control power? It is the power to alter. So the President can alter, he can modify, he can nullify, or set aside what his subordinate or what a lower officer had done in the performance of his duties, right? So remember, that should be in the performance of his duties, not in his personal life. So that if the subordinate wants to marry someone, the President cannot alter or cannot modify that decision because that particular subordinate is not performing his duty, no? Okay, that is about his personal life, so that shouldn't be included. So I repeat, it is the power of the President to alter, to modify, to nullify, or set aside what a subordinate has done. So what will happen there? He can, of course, substitute the decision, no, or the act of the subordinate officer with his own decision. So he can disapprove the decision of that subordinate. Okay, so that is when taken together with the appointment power, of course, control and supervision of his executive secretaries, right? So he can modify their decisions, and whatever acts that has been done may be ordered by him to be undone. Okay, so that is the control power. Another, you have the military power in Section 18, no? Military power. So this military power, however, there is again the participation of the Congress here. So what is this military power? This military power can now command, okay, because of his power, the President is the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces of the Philippines. Okay, so that during times of emergency or during invasion and rebellion and that public safety requires it, then what can the President do? Being the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces of the Philippines, he can now call on the armed forces to suppress or to prevent invasion or rebellion. So that is the power of the President, military power. And also, what can he do? He can also declare martial law, okay, in any part of the Philippines or can be all over the Philippines. So that is how powerful the President is. Right? So you know of presidents who have declared martial law, and our present or incumbent president also declared martial law, right, in Mindanao by reason of invasion by the ISIS. Okay, and he even extended that with the approval, of course, of the Congress, but it was already lifted, right? Okay, so that is the military power of the President. Next is you have the pardoning power. Okay, so what is the pardoning power? The pardoning power is provided in Section 19 of Article 7 again. Okay, so that the President can issue reprieve, commutation. Okay, what else? No, reprieve, commutation, so that is a pardon, no? Okay, at his own discretion, and also amnesty. However, amnesty must be concurred in by the Congress. Okay, so what is the pardoning power? Pardoning power is the act of grace It is the executive clemency, as we can say. No, it is the act of grace which exempts the individual on whom it is bestowed from the punishment which the law inflicts for the crime he has committed. So there you go. If you are pardoned by the president, or if someone is pardoned by the president, so he is convicted of a crime, for example, but he was pardoned by the president, then he will be excused, no, from the punishment of that crime, no, that the law inflicts for that crime. So as if he didn't commit any crime. Okay, lately, you know the news that our president pardoned the guy who killed the LGBT, right? Okay, he pardoned Pemberton. He was convicted and was pardoned by President Duterte. And with that, we cannot question because it is his discretion. Okay? It is not an amnesty, but it is a pardon. That's why it cannot be questioned. The Congress does not have authority to question the executive clemency. Okay, remember also that President Estrada was pardoned by President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Okay, so that's why he was able to run again for an elective position. He is now the mayor. Okay, so that is the pardoning power. Okay, however, this pardoning power cannot be granted, no? In cases such as, number one, you have impeachment. So remember that Chief Justice Corona was impeached, right? So the president cannot issue pardon. Another is the violation of election laws. So if someone violated the election laws, then you cannot be pardoned by the president because it is prohibited by law. Okay, so that is the pardoning power. Next, okay, so there, impeachment and violation of any election law, rule, or regulation. The next one is the diplomatic power. So the diplomatic power is in section 21 of the same article. So what does it say? The president can now deal with foreign states and governments. What can he do? He can extend, he can withhold recognition or maintain diplomatic relations, enter into treaties, and otherwise transact the business of foreign relations. It is because the president is the most qualified person to transact in behalf of the country, right? Being the highest official of the land. So that is his diplomatic power. So remember that there are a lot of issues about our president today. He wants to cut our diplomatic relations with the US, right? Okay, and he wants to extend, or he wants to make our diplomatic relation with China and Russia tighter. Okay? And then remember that he also withdrew, or the country also withdrew from the International Criminal Court. Okay? And that is the manifestation of the diplomatic power of our president. Okay, so there, deal with foreign states and governments, extend or withhold recognition, maintain diplomatic relations, enter into treaties, and otherwise transact the business of foreign relations. Next is you have which is found in section 22, the budgetary power. So that's it. Being the president, he determines the needs of the government. And what does he do? He proposes the corresponding appropriations to the Congress. That is for the general appropriation, right? So that is for the general appropriation, okay, on the basis of existing or expected source of revenue. So he reports or gives it to the Congress. No? That is the budgetary power of the president. Next, you have the informing power. So the president will inform or give information, deliver information about his administration to the public or to the Congress. So that is the informing power of the president. So that is found in section 23, again in the same article. And how is that manifested, or how does he do that? It is through what is known as the State of the Nation Address. So when is it delivered? Of course, during the opening of the regular session of the legislature. Okay, so last July, our president delivered his State of the Nation Address, and he dealt more with this crisis, right? So that is the informing power of the president. Next is you have the veto power of the president. So this will be dealt more when we go to the legislative department. But for the meantime, when we say veto power, if there is a bill that has been passed, and then the president in his mind or thinks that the law or the bill is not reasonable, so he's going now to return the bill to its origin, but he has to indicate his objections thereto, so that the origin, which is the legislature or the Congress, will study it and make the necessary corrections. So that is the veto power of the president, okay, with regards to laws, the creation of laws. Next is you have the borrowing power. So the borrowing power is in Article 7, of course, Section 20. So the president can borrow money, and that is, he can borrow as much as he can. Okay, and it will be the debt of the Philippines or the country, the Filipino people. So there, the borrowing power. He can contract or guarantee loans on behalf of the Republic of the Philippines. And of course, it is with the approval of the monetary board. So there is a monetary board who shall approve what the president is doing, or what the loan. And then it can be contracted by the Department of Finance, the Secretary of the Department of Finance, being the alter ego of the president. Okay, so that is the borrowing power. And lastly, of course, is for the internal affairs, you have the Ordinance Power. So being the president, he can issue, okay, there, he can give issuances, okay. And what is this for? It is for the policy and the programs of the administration. So what does this include? For example, so executive orders. So there are a lot of executive orders being given by our presidents. Next, you have the administrative orders. or you have the proclamation. Next, maybe the memorandum orders or circulars, and you have the general or specific orders. So those are just some powers of the president. There can be more, but we discussed only 11 powers. No? Let us go over the powers again. From the very beginning, you have the appointing power. Next, you have the removal power, which is implied in the appointing power. Next, you have the military power, making the president the chief, commander-in-chief of all the armed forces of the Philippines, who can declare martial law, okay, and he can call the calling out power, so he can call the Philippine army to suppress or to prevent lawless invasion or rebellion. Okay, so that is the military power. What else? The ordinance power. What else? You have the budgetary power. You have the borrowing power. You have the control power. Okay, control with supervision. You have the pardoning power. You have the budgetary power. You have, what else did we forget? The diplomatic power. And lastly, you have the veto power of the president. I hope you remember something from this lecture. So after this lecture, you can go over the Constitution, Article 7 of the Philippine Constitution, which talks about the executive department of the Philippines. In our next lecture, we will be talking about the executive department. And again, thank you for listening.